So when we're considering the idea of something that's sensory and something that's arbitrary, I don't think you can deny that the two are linked, but only to a certain extent. So for example, if you're reading a book, it is arbitrary in terms of the fact that the words in the book that are made up in that book are arbitrary. For example, dog, D-O-G, is arbitrary. There's nothing in those three letters that actually resemble the animal. And so when you look at that though, however, from a sensory perspective, there must be something in there that's innate, because when we're reading a book and you have a sentence, for example, the dog went into the forest, we don't sit there and look at every single word and try to decode it. We actually, something inside of us processes that, or it would take 2 years to try to read a 100-page novel. So there's something innate in us, I think, that lends itself to that theory of a sensory perception that helps us to be able to just go through a book, to read it, and to absorb the information. And again, going back to the idea of the dog, that's arbitrary because that would be something separate. If you have D-O-G, like I said, nothing in that represents the actual animal. However, something that's arbitrary is agreed to by convention. And so D-O-G is, in the English-speaking language, agreed to represent that furry animal. However, if you take those letters D-O-G and you go to France, they're not going to recognize that it represents that furry animal. They're going to recognize chien, C-H-I-E-N, I believe it is, to represent a furry animal. And so that would be, I think, the biggest difference between arbitrary and censor. Okay, so when you're talking about symbols, I mean, our world is full of symbols and we don't really realize how we know them. They're just sort of part of our life. For example, I think about so many traffic signs and signs that we see when we're driving. There's a yellow triangular one that has an exclamation mark in there, which is warning or caution. And so obviously nothing in that sign says to you, or no one comes up and says to you, this means you have to be careful or be warned of something. You know that automatically, okay? So there's things though that are built into that symbol, the triangle, the color yellow, which is caution, symbol to the amber light. When you come to a light, cautionary, you don't have to stop, and you don't have to go, but you have to be careful because something's happening. And it's the same thing with the symbol. You know that it's agreed to by convention, and it's arbitrary. So this type of thing can also be applied to pre-attentive processing, and I'll give you an example of that with a rose. If you look at a rose, denotatively, it's just a flower. Okay, and take away all sort of cultural associations. Basically, it's a flower, but who looks at a rose as just a flower? Automatically, when we see a rose, we are bringing in pre-attentive processing to that. You are thinking of romance, you think of love. I mean, nobody gives, for Valentine's Day, why do people stop and think, well, you know what, I'll just give you a block of cement, or or something like that. Wouldn't have the same effect. You want to give someone a rose, okay? And there's certain things with, you want to give red rose, which symbolizes love, and that's the type of thing you do, and you don't even think about why you do it. This pre-attentive processing can obviously be applied to video games as well, and I think it often is, with all sorts of symbols and icons that you read in a game and you automatically interpret and you process and you apply when you're playing that video game. And much like you don't know why you're buying red roses on Valentine's Day, but you just do it, there's an understanding to it, the same thing can be applied to video games and icons and symbols that you see in video games.
The way of navigating through space is really concerned with things that are accidental, about things which are without purpose. So if one were to go on a derivé in Toronto or Mississauga or wherever, one would just kind of go out and sort of see what one got caught up in, what one was attracted to, what they noticed. They would see, how their desires were channeled through the city. And I think that's really important because it's about creating maps which are based on desire. And these may be other kinds of desire. They don't have to be, I want a coffee at Starbucks. It can be, I like to have a nap on a grassy knoll somewhere. It can be a whole bunch of things. So there's something about the dérivé that's about destructuring our life and letting other ways of knowing and sensing and apprehending the world manifest themselves. And the dérivé is really based on something that's very much happenstance. It's about the unintended. It's about what you notice when you're distracted. And the dérivé, it's like in the 19th century, manufacturers picked up on this idea. People who sold clothing or textiles, they made nice window displays. So you'd walk by their shop and you go, "Oh, I would love a cashmere robe like that," and you go in and buy it. That was a novel idea of the 19th century, and it's based on somebody being distracted and not having a kind of a plan about what they're going. And so the accidental is really important. And I think in something like you're mentioning the game Warcraft, which I've never played, it sounds like it's very structured. There's certain kinds of tasks and certain kinds of goals, and there's not much of the accidental in that environment. I think that's probably very different with Second Life, when other users are defining that environment. So it's more like you're surfing the internet or other people's Facebook pages where you're going, "Ooh, my friend has these really cool pictures, let me look at them." Or let me check out people's status profiles. And they're changing that material. In that sense, it gets a lot more like the dérivé. So I think in some of those environments, there's more possibility of that. I'm not sure how radical it is. I think that a lot of it's targeted towards marketing. I'm sure that you're getting targeted left and right for buying whatever it is that you have to be searching at that moment. Yeah.